basically what I was trying to get at with my whole diatribe here is that everybody's, I think, in the age of the internet, with so many examples, with so much advice out there, and there's just, like I said, I think we just need to not take everything so damn seriously. I think that there's this tendency with role playing games to compare ourselves to other people, to stuff we see online, to channels and all that. And these are role playing games, and so I think it's important to remember that it's about having fun, it's about having a good time, it's about meeting with your friends every week, every other week, once a month, whatever, and you know if they keep coming back to the table, then that's what matters. Don't worry too much about all this advice online, even what I'm saying now. If that doesn't fit you, then take it serious, and leave a comment, tell me to shut up. But anyway, I wanted to get to this at the top of the thing, but stay tuned. If we hit 5K by January 1st, I'm going to give away this Draw Steel book to somebody on one of these live streams. So keep watching the live streams if you want that book. Just want to throw that in there. But yeah, so this is going to be kind of a different stream. I've never done a dev stream, and honestly, I think I worked on a lot of the parts this morning that I had play tested. We've had 6 play tests now, I think. Maybe even more. I started to kind of track them more. But let's jump over here so you guys can see what I'm doing. Let's go live. Here it is. This is the game. This is the one I've been talking about. This is 7 Delving Sins. This is, all your normal nonsense, which we don't have to go into. But I wanted to give kind of a highlight of this game since I'm trying to build some hype for it, because I want it to happen. I want it to be a thing, and you got to talk about something to build excitement for it. So instead of building another island today, I've just been really in the trenches with this game, and I want to talk about it a bit. Yeah. So basically, if you didn't watch the video where I did the big announcement, this is a game that rolls 2d6, and it cares about really 3 numbers. Mostly a 7 or better. If you get a 7 or better, you succeed at the intent of whatever your role is. There are no stats. There are no skills. You just say what you want to do, and you get all that kind of stuff out of the way, and you don't worry about it. And that keeps you from kind of slowing the game down, going, well, I don't have, a juggling skill or a underwater basket weaving skill, so maybe I shouldn't even roll this. It's just, let's roll some dice, let's see what happens. If you get a 7 or better, you get your intent. If you get an 11, that's a crit. We're basically using craps numbers here, if you've ever played that game. And then a 6 is missing the mark. I've changed target numbers to be called marks because I think it fits the theme with sin, which I think is an archery term, to mean you just missed the mark. So you either get a 6, which means you gain 1 personal sin, a bank of +1s that you can basically spend all at once on a roll after the fact to try to succeed or whatever, or even try to crit if your numbers fall right. If you get exactly a 7, you have a complication, and we roll on the 7 Delving Sins table. And it's only for non-attack tests. I'm trying a lot of stuff out. None of this is absolute yet. This is all stuff I'm tinkering with. But yeah, 7 or better is a pass. And I'm probably going to take a lot of this language out because it's already too busy. We don't need to know that it's a Mark 7. Literally everything in the game is a Mark 7. And I may even delete this. Because I think I took out the part of the game, armor, yeah. I think I'm taking out armor rolls because it was too fiddly. It was fun in a certain way, but if the game's, we could talk about design intent. If the goal of this game is to be the game you play when your regular game falls through, you want it to be fairly simple and straightforward. And so I think I was getting a little too deep in the paint. If you know my history, where I come from, I grew up in Pathfinder First Edition, so like my nature is to be fiddly, and I have to sometimes fight my nature. So that's one thing I looked at, and in fact, we playtested it last night, and it was about the third time that I heard, I don't know how I feel about armor rolls. So I took a look at it, and I go, yeah, this is bogging down play, especially combat, which is already typically the slowest part of any role-playing game. So, and then I get to take out words like this and make it even more concise. It's just all tests are a sum of 2d6. There's no armor tests. That's gone. So I'm cleaning up some stuff, and I worked on, like I said, I worked on this a bit earlier. Took care of some of the bigger problems just so I wasn't on stream going, oh, this is interesting, and you guys were just staring at my dumb face. Yeah, these are the three numbers: 6, 7, 11. You want to beat a 7. Exactly a 7 is a complication, and we've found in play that 7s come up quite often. So you're either going to love that or hate that about this game. I think it's fun because the idea is like maybe you're playing kind of co-op and no one's really the GM. So you roll that 7 and you go, how I rolled a greed. How is taking the obvious bait or loot going to affect what just happened whenever I rolled this? And you kind of just work through it and you try to figure out what's narratively interesting or satisfying. And yeah, so it comes up every time you roll 7, but no other times. So, and then I have some abilities to kind of counter that. I'm going to jump around a bit today because I'm talking about the broad feel of this game. So you have class abilities. Right now I have it that once per session you can replace a 7 Delving Sins, I didn't write the 7, complication with your class ability. So instead of being like, well, I have to take the bait, maybe you're a marauder and you hide yourself or an ally from notice. Maybe you slip past that complication that was going to happen, and instead you actually get a boon. So, and then once you use it, the only way to get it back right now is to have everyone agree to empty the company pool of all liquid assets. I don't know if I'm going to stick with this terminology, but there's like a real theme about the company. I don't know if you guys have seen my Shadow Dark video, but basically this game has a big theme about, you know, working for the company, doing things for the team. It's all about collaborating rather than like this individual idea that a lot of games have. So that's a big push of it. And then we have our 11 class abilities, our 11 ancestries, because 2d6. And then, you know, it's pretty standard stuff. These are the basics. You know, they fit on a single sheet. And this is just my Google Doc version, which I'm a very amateur layout person. But I have somebody I'm going to be working with that is going to help me make this look hopefully really nice and succinct, and I'll cut out some of the fluffy language here. Get it really concise, like that kind of Shadow Dark style where like you get just enough words you need to go off of and not too much fluff. But yeah, I've been working on the action economy for the game. I'm hoping that all fits on a half page so that it's really easy to reference in the moment. Quick reference guide to some of the more important things that go on. And then we have a really quick character creation. Like you roll 2d6, let's see, for ancestry. So 1, 2 for class, 3 you roll your hit points. You make a unique thing about yourself that gives you a +1 on tests. 4 you roll your gear. And gear is like, you know, 7 items plus your level. I don't even know if I'm going to keep this. Equipment adds +1 to relative tests or bypasses. I think it just bypasses a test. Because I kind of like this idea of like almost no math to this game. I'm going to say equipment can bypass a test entirely. Thank you. Yeah, worn items like armor, clothes, and rings and shields don't take up a slot. You can stack up to 5 things as long as they're not like armor or weapons. Start with a torch, D3 provisions, and basic clothes. Then you roll D3 and pick that many mundane items. Or you can roll one more time than whatever you rolled, basically, on this table here. And then we roll once for armor, and if you're lucky, a shield. And containers and backpacks add 1 slot and are considered worn, so they don't take up a slot. Then I tried to distill. We've been, if you're not on the Discord and you want to get involved, I do a lot of like brainstorming sessions on there, and we were coming up with like, what are the 36? Because this game only uses D6s. What are the 36 items that are like basically the best kind of dungeon delving gear? And this was the list we compiled, and we had people like, we really argued about this sack of flour versus like sand or like dust and powder and stuff like that. And like Merlotron really argued for the canvas tarp being more interesting than just like strips of cloth or something like that. Isor, if reframed to increase the numbers shown on the die, it doesn't feel like math, just ticking up my die. Increase the numbers shown on the die. Oh, you mean for like +1 for an item? Yeah, I'll probably revisit that eventually, because I do have right now the only thing really giving you a +1 is your unique thing, and you basically get one of these every time you level up. So basically, like, write down a descriptive skill your character starts with, something evocative like born with a blade, magic college dropout, or thieves guild initiate. And so that's kind of your way of saying, like, maybe I rolled Inquisitor and I can convince or distract people of something like once a session. But I want to have an Inquisitor who's sort of like a rogue feel in like a classic D&D sense. So you say, like, I am a thieves guild initiate. I get +1 on things that are like sneaking around and unlocking doors and chests and stuff. So, and I kind of like limiting that to just one avenue, if that makes sense. I don't, it could be situational. There's nothing's hard and fast in this game. If a GM says like, yeah, sure, I'll give you a +1. You've got caltrops, to slow the enemies behind you. Roll 2d6 and we'll see how it goes. That's most of the game is like, that's the other thing about this game. I really want it to live somewhere in the middle of that narrative versus like what's on the sheet, because I think there's always, in a lot of fantasy role-playing games, there's a moment of departure that happens, and it's usually when you roll initiative and everyone stops thinking creatively. And one of my goals is that I hope this game never really leaves that creative thinking, that it's always worthwhile to use your actions to create narrative effects or like inject some creativity into the scene. So part of it is like avoiding looking down at your character sheet too often. So I don't want a ton of little fiddly numbers that float around and you keep going, wait, I think I have a +1 to something, and then you're just staring at it. It's like, no, I know I have, a blacksmith's hammer in my backpack, so what'll that give me in this scene? I don't know if that makes sense to anyone's brain but me, but hopefully that kind of answers the question. Yeah, and that, again, this gets into sort of design principles with this. One of the hopes is that this game feels a bit more like bridges the gap of narrative games with like old school feeling games, because I know there are games that exist like Dungeon World and stuff, but I'm not always a huge fan of how some of the things are implemented. Makes sense. Love the ethos. Cool. Yeah, and I try to, whenever I'm doing these playtests, I've tried to really explain my thought process and not just been like, it's my way or the highway, because that's not the point. I want to hear feedback, but I also want to paint a clear picture of what I'm trying to design here. So real quick, I changed up armor significantly today. If you've been following along, this will make sense. If you haven't, if this is the first time you haven't done any of the playtests, you're going to be like, what's he talking about? But basically, I had armor be a D6 roll, which was already different than the 2D6, so scrapped it largely for that reason, but also because it bogged things down, and it made combat just a hair too fiddly. I keep using that word, too involved. I really want it to be simple. So armor right now, you roll 2d6 when you make your character to see what armor type and quality you get. And these aren't set in stone. I made them like an hour ago. But basically it's like your type is light, medium, or heavy, or nothing. And it determines how much damage you block. And then your quality is how many uses per scene or combat, whatever you want to call it, encounter, that you get to use that armor. Almost in like a kind of a Daggerheart way. I may even like make a character sheet at some point that has like little bubbles you can fill in, because it's going to be like 1 to 6 uses basically. And even this, I might knock off 6 uses and go down to like 5, because already that's kind of crazy and a lot. So, but yeah, the idea is that, like, you know, let's say you rolled medium armor and you rolled just good old ordinary medium armor. That means when you get hit with an attack, you can block 2 of that damage 4 times that scene, and then it needs to be repaired. And repairing is a double action. I haven't talked about action economy. Like I said, I'm going to be jumping around. In 7 Deadly Sins, characters get 2 actions per turn. Action economy, 2 things: action move, move, or double action. Right now, there are only 2 things that are a double action. That is mending armor. It requires a double action to reset your armor's uses, and spellcasting costs a double action to cast a spell, because they're 2 of the most important and potent things you can do in this game. Spellcasting goes beyond just doing something that adds a narrative effect, and it actually has like some specifics, which I'll get to in a minute here. But you can always try a narrative effect. You can roll 2d6 as an action for an effect. You could just say, I want to trip up these orcs and make them all stumble over each other, and maybe even add a tag to it, which, you know, I'll jump down here to say, maybe if you hear words like, I want to knock them prone, right? That means it'll take their action to stand, and they can't move this turn, and they get, and I might even change this +1 against you to like a boon. Melee has a boon. Whoa. Switching keyboards is fun. But yeah, just to jump back to the action economy. This is how my brain works, folks. This is why this game is all over the place right now. And then, I wanted to add with the armor. Right now, I don't know how I feel about this totally yet, because this is another thing that sort of makes combat go a little back and forth. But most of the time, monsters or foes are rolling a d6. A few of them might be rolling like 2d6. But blocking all damage allows you to make a free melee counterattack. It's been really fun in combat because only the players get this. It's a very asymmetric game, meaning the way that the delvers, as I'm calling them, operate is very different than the way foes operate. Foes get 1 action and a move, and they tend to like, because, here, I'll jump around one more time. Because of all this, I have it written here that, where did I write it? Basically non-attack rolls. Yeah, there it is. Only roll complications on non-attack tests, which helps kind of make combat go a little bit faster. It does pull away a hair of the narrative, but instead of collaborating to decide what the complication is, the vehicle of that complication with an attack roll comes from a foe. So if you look at foes here, I'll just show you an example of the aliens. When the foe rolls a melee 7, and again, this is assuming you might not be the GM, you might just be running these together. So if the foe rolls a 7 in melee, they steal a liquid asset from the company pool. This foe can now spend it. If the Delver, or the PCs, roll a 7, the Delver saves, or you force an immediate action. This is kind of like your Aboleth mind control. And they, like, you say, like, hit your friend or something. And then they have to save or do that. And then on a crit, they gain a D6 shield for D3 hits. So this is kind of how monsters are run. And then when you are the monster, they're basically you roll on a table to determine, what rank are they? Are they minions, average, elites, or legendaries? And then that decides how these monsters fight. So you roll 2d6 for minions, and they deal the lower of the 2 dice that you rolled to hit with. This sort of tries to speed up combat as well. And then I have like quick morale, which morale is like your HP. What else do we want to showcase here that it may or may not excite you about this game, but may tell you how you feel about it? I'll go back to armor because that's where I branched off originally. So I'm going to try this armor in the next few playtests. I'm going to see if having a set amount that you can block a number of times is more interesting and less time-consuming than having to roll for armor every time you're hit. I have shields just basically adding an extra block for the moment. I haven't messed with these since the conception of the idea, so this could change as well. And I have the company. So let's talk about this a bit, because this is a really big theme within the game. I almost like want to move this out of character creation. And were there 2 streams? Oh, weird. Maybe that's what happened. So I'll read this out loud. For the company, gain an asset by stocking up the company pool with liquid assets. I need to reword that. They are bonus D6s. You simply do something brave, foolhardy, or clever that honors the company oath, especially if that action gets you into more shenanigans or trouble. Decide as a group what your company oath is, or roll on the list. So this is the idea I kind of presented in the 3 ways to fix deadly games or OSR games or like Shadow Dark and stuff, is this idea that like everyone's part of the same crew. They have the same goals, they come from the same place, and even if like personally they might have some differences, this is just a quick, cohesive way to say like, hey, we're just playing this game for an evening. What is our company like? And you can roll on the table, you can come up with your own. This isn't an exhaustive list, but it's a jumping off point. And then once you have this oath, like say, ambition rises above all else, and you decide in the moment to do something ambitious, you get to put a D6 into the company pool that any of you guys can grab out and add to any roll at any point. So if you hit the bad guy and you're like, I want to squeeze out just a little bit more damage, I'm going to take 2 of the D6 that are in the company pool. And that's like your sneak attacks and stuff. It kind of somewhat pulled this idea from Deathbringer. I thought it was really cool, really succinct way to create and flavor like abilities and specialities and stuff. But I liked it being tied to this company pool so that you're kind of sharing them, or you can like use them for each other. Like I think the way I want to use it reactively is if you have an ally that needs it. So someone else can say like, hey, you know what? I think you need to save from this mind control ability that Aboleth just tried to hit you with. I'm going to pull from the company assets or the liquid assets, and you go ahead and roll that die. I think that might be a cool way to incentivize cooperative play. But yeah, it all hinges on this idea of the company, basically. So,
This just fell down.
oh no, my thing fell down. I've been revealed. Hold on. That's fine. Whatever. The stream's not about my backdrop, so it'll take too much time to get it back up. You can pick a company name. Again, this is stuff I need to clean up. What's in a name? Adjective, noun is a good place to start, or you can just roll. You're the grim guardians. Alliteration, right? And then once you're done with all the character creation, decide who's the torchbearer. If you have a negotiator, I mean, maybe you're playing the solo and it's all you. Who leads the charge? Kind of like who steps first into a room, just so that like there are no gotcha moments. If you like roll later on and you trigger a trap or something like that. And yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's super important. It's going to feature a lot of Sparks tables because I really do want this to have a sort of emergent discovery style of play where like I said, if you play it co-op, you can say like, I call this auto mode right now. Like, what do you find in the room? Maybe it's empty, maybe it's full of treasure, maybe it's traps, maybe there are like a couple of enemies or one big enemy. And what are they? Are they kobolds? Are they dragonkin? Maybe they're a mixture, a combination. You roll a couple of times, and all these tables will have this idea of like roll twice just in case to either combine the results, or like be inspired by what you roll. So really a lot of these tables are going to be like roll twice and either combine them, pick one, or like just be inspired and do something else that you're like, actually it would be cool if these kobolds were enslaved by the aboleth, and now we get to decide like, are we evil and we just say like, hey, cool man, do your thing, we're here for the treasure, or do we try to save the kobolds and stuff like that. What are they doing? What do they want? Hopefully you guys can see this on the side. How they react. So that, are they friendly, hostile, interested, curious, like want to sell you stuff? They have loot maybe. Who they attack, and this is more like combat. You just kind of roll as soon as you figure out like things are headed towards violence. Do they pick on the guy that looks like the healer with little to no armor, or are they going for the big guy up front, or do they like split off and all attack different people? My ear trumpet has been struck by lightning. Thank you for gifting a membership. That's awesome. I appreciate you. In fact, you know what? Just for the memes, as I was doing the gear table, we were talking about all this stuff, like what makes the gear table, and I was like, ear trumpet's got to stay in there. It's such a ridiculous item, and it's on like every sort of classic D&D list. So there's your little homage, ear trumpet. It's just like all this other stuff is like really fun or pretty useful in some circumstance, or like the only thing that like soap is, I don't know, soap has its uses. I'll leave it at that. And then ear trumpet was like, I was like, should I make room for like, at one point I didn't have jar of oil, so it was like, should I get rid of ear trumpet for jar of oil? I dropped incense instead because I feel like that's more something you just have if you're like a priest type. It's a wonderful item. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So many varied uses. It's just a fun one. I kept it for the memes, basically. Okay, I got way off course. I was going down here. Who do they attack? What do they drop? And what's the event? In case, you roll an event is like, I think number 7, so probably like the most common thing that happens. Like, so what's the event that's going on? Is it a funeral? Is it a wedding? Are they in the middle of a dark ritual when you show up upon them? Like, what is it? And then let's see. Talked about the foes a little bit. Let's look at magic, because pay no attention to the curtain behind the man. Exactly. You got it. because I've done two major overhauls to Magic at this point. I want to get it just right, and I started to go down this path. I had a really cool Magic system. I just don't think it was for this game. And the Magic system was, I had these like kind of medieval style elements. So not just the four we think of, like fire, uh, water, air, and earth, but there were things like here. There's a few of them that still survived, like blood and spirit and uh, ice, ash, and those did kind of survive. But basically, you rolled three times. You rolled for the element of the spell. You rolled for the school, which was like, is it destruction? Is it creation? Is it illusion? And then you rolled for a what I call a catalyst, which is like the vehicle through which your magic is performed, and that decided like how many targets does it hit? Is it a breath weapon? Is it like a long line? And some of that is still going to be in there in a small way, but I've shifted everything around and I homogenized it to basically be roll twice on this d6 6 table because everything's d6s in the game. So spells require a physical trinket to be stored in, such as a medallion or a skull. You can make up whatever it is. Spells take up one inventory each and cause a wound or magic mishap if failed. Write down something cool that your spell is stored in. And so now it's just been simplified to this right here. This is spells. Roll twice on the spell spark table and combine the results. Reorder them to make the most sense to you, and use an adjective that better suits the inspiration for your spell. And basically, if you're struggling with how to use one word, re-roll and try again. You have my permission. This is to inspire spells, because some of them are going to be weird. Like, I almost want to just break out my mono makes here and do a 2d6 roll and see what we get. Because I think this is really fun. This is definitely not the end-all be-all list. I was cleaning it up earlier, and some of them just were funky and didn't quite work. So, alright, I'm taking my 2d6, and I get, wow, I rolled 6-6. So, nature. And now I'm going to roll one more time to see what we're combining it with. 41. Magma. See, and this is where it's like, maybe if I changed it a little bit to like plant or something. So like a magma plant. Let's just try it for fun. Magma plant or plant magma. So any way you want to interpret those results, maybe when you cast the spell, a tree emerges and it's like made of liquid magma. It starts spewing magma everywhere, or like a hardened magma plant emerges and you can use it like a ladder to climb up its branches. It's supposed to be like really interpretive and loose and narrative, so that you can sit there and say like, I got mend ice. That's a weird one, right? And maybe that means like your armor, your item broke, right? And so I cast the spell on it, and it freezes the item in a block of ice, but it slowly mends it back together. And then you have like an ice axe with the haft is like, a frozen permanent block of ice or something. I just thought like magic should be cool and evocative, and it should not be, squished down and limited into like, here's an example. It drives me crazy when I'm playing a game like 5e, and I have a fireball spell, right? It's my only fire spell, let's say. And I think it would be cool because I have the ability to create fire. I think I should be able to light every candle in the bar simultaneously with that spell, right? I just snap my fingers, and instead of that little bead, as it's described, of energy flying out and causing a big explosion, it just it sprays out and hits all of the candles in an area, or vice versa. I snuff out all the lights in the room because I have this control over fire. I just think these are way cooler ways to interpret magic than just like it does this one specific thing, right? Like, and it always does it in this way. Which can be fine if you're playing a more tactical game. But this game is all about loosey-goosey narrative fun. So I think just having a spark table, however this ends up looking like, is a fun way to do it. And then if you want to get more granular with it, I have some extra rules. Like I say here, spells are loose narrative frameworks for extraordinary effects. They can do things that simple narrative flourishes don't allow, yet they do have some mechanical bindings. Tier 1 spell deals 1d6 damage to targets or heals 1 morale for d6 turns. It's always going to be that d6. A Tier 1 spell targets 1 creature, or you can split it to target 2, but you do half the effect or d3s instead, basically. And then I kind of homogenized the cost of the cost of magic for your character. You roll a magic mishap and you figure out what that is. With the idea here being magic is a sword without a hilt. That's the good old George R. R. Martin wrote that in one of his books. Where's there space there? Once you become touched by the arcane, roll the d6 magic mishaps table to determine what happens when the magic you cast fails. This triggers regardless of the spell or source. So even if you get multiple spells across play, you always have, like, the oblivion mishap. So, like, you get amnesia, paramnesia, where you can't tell, like, reality from dreams and things, or delirium. And if you want to quantify it, I may even do something like this. Make this the italics, right, to show that this is sort of the flavor. But if you want a hard and fast rule, then you become afraid or confused whenever you fail to cast that spell. Or, I kind of had a version where if none of that sounded super fun or interesting to you, you could go back and you could roll on that 7 Delving Sins table again, and you can kind of interpret the result of what happens, which is a little more loosey-goosey and a little more time-consuming, but can be fun narratively if, like, you're just like, another, like, kind of madness doesn't seem super interesting right now. Like, I'm already wasting one action. Now I have to waste both actions every turn because I failed a second spell. Stuff like that where... Actually, I guess you couldn't because spells cost 2 actions, but you get my point. And then I have a bunch of fiddly bits about different stuff, and then let's jump down to catalysts. Because this was an idea I came up with that I didn't want to totally scrap because of the way I changed magic, but I wanted to move and use somewhere else as like an add-on rather than like the basic way magic works. But essentially, catalysts... Alright, so I wrote, warriors in role-playing games get cool magic swords, so why shouldn't wizards have just as much fun stuff to look forward to? Catalysts take a mage's mighty spells and funnel them into something even more awesome. They shape a standard spell into something that packs even more punch. These conduits mold magic to their form and can also raise the tier of a spell. So you would, if you found one, like you just, rolled on a table and said, like, hey, one of these kobolds dropped a magic catalyst. What is it? We can roll and see. And then you go down here and you say, like, you know what? I found he was wearing like a bone skull that he was channeling all of his magic through. And here's a little description. A human skull etched with eldritch runes. A glittering emerald eye. And a glittering emerald eye. The jawbones of an ancient wyvern. The mazzard of a long-dead saint forged into an unholy thurible. That's a lot of fluff to say that the bone remains of powerful beings turn spells into breath weapons that radiate outward in a cone, covering all nearby targets in that direction. And nearby is one of our range bands that's kind of similar to, like, if you've played games like Shadow Dark. This is one of the range bands there. Sorry, by the way, my computer died, so I don't have chat pulled up. If anyone's using it, I'm kind of just rambling right now. So let's see. Make sure I am paying some attention to the chat. Venus flytrap with a magma mouth. That's cool. See? You're already getting it. You're already there. I just love narrative finesse on Magic and stuff like that. Because, like, we already live in a world confined by rules. If you have Magic, Magic should be the thing that hacks the rules of the world and breaks the laws of nature. I think that's the fantasy of Magic, and that's what makes it fun. So the more you can sort of stretch that fantasy with your imagination, I think the better. So that's why I wanted to make a system. So much has changed in the last 36 hours. Dude, you're not kidding. I did like 2 more playtests, and I'm hitting it hard, y'all. I'm trying to get this thing shaped up into a game that I would want to run and I would want to play. So hopefully that is conveyed through what we're talking about today. I think this game is going to kick ass, honestly. Maze Rat's Magic System kicked me from 5e, so I fully support this. I need to read Maze Rats without it influencing me too much, if that makes sense. Everybody has been saying that's like the game of Spark Tables. It's probably very similar to some of the things I'm doing here, but yeah. So, anyways, this is the basics. There's a little bit more to it so far. You know, I haven't gone over, like weapons, for instance. I went really straightforward. Again, only using D6s. So, like, a simple weapon is a D3, and these are you might think of as like one-handers or not even one-handers, but like a light weapon in like D&D or something, like daggers and clubs. We have a two-handed basic weapon, which is a D6 plus a D3. One basic weapon, which is just a D6. So anything from like a flail to a mace, Morningstar, short sword, bastard sword. I guess bastard sword would technically be two-handed or hand and a half. And then, you might roll 3 basic weapons, and you can choose like a one-hander, a two-hander, and a ranged, or get like twin simple weapons and 1 basic range. So like 2 D3 weapons that you're dual wielding. And let's as sort of a last thing before I wrap up here, let's just go through the whole action economy, because I think this is like the meat and potatoes of what you'll end up doing a lot of the time. Everything has been done. Yeah, exactly, man. There's nothing new under the sun. This is just my version of all of my favorite little pieces of different games crammed together to hopefully make a fun night of play that's easy to run, easy to adjudicate, easy to create things on the fly, and very collaborative and narrative. But yeah, like I said before, if you're just tuning in, you get 2 actions on a turn. Action, move, action, move, or a double action. You can attack. Your second attack is made at a -1. That just like makes you either get 6 or 7 a lot, which, as we said, those are 2 of the 3 important numbers. So you're either like getting a yes, but you get your intent, but with a twist, or you're getting a sin, just missing the mark of success, which means you actually stockpile that sin and there are pluses to use later. Up to 7, of course, because 7 is the name of the game. Counter, I'm still on the fence about. Block all damage, allows you to make a free melee attack. A crit, I've changed since last night. Deal max damage die plus another die, bank a sin, or add 1 die to the liquid assets pool. So basically you get 3 choices. Do I want to do something right now, deal a little extra damage? Do I want to be selfish later? Or do I want to do something for the team? And this can also be kind of selfish too, because you can use it to get back your class abilities if you've already spent it. This needs to go away because this isn't here anymore. When you defend... Yeah, honestly, I don't even think this needs to be here at all, because defense is just your armor and how much it blocks. Dual wielding is 1 action, you make 1 attack roll, and you deal 2 damage die. So if you have D3s, you roll both of those. If you have D6s, you roll both of those. And you're sacrificing a shield and the ability to negate more damage and more attacks for a second dice of damage, if that makes sense. Which, looking at it, I might have to revisit how two-handed weapons work. Maybe roll with advantage or something like that. Or as I'm calling it here, a boon. Because this is already like, why would you... Shield makes sense, and shield and sword or whatever, but like, why would you... This is part of the game designing moment. Why would you use a two-handed weapon right now over like 2d6? So I'll have to figure that out. Maybe you can power attack or something. Movement, you move up to a near distance or get up from prone. Narrative effect, we talked about a bit. Ranged attack. So this is kind of unique to this game. And I may just change this to something else. But for now, it's roll a d6 after you make a ranged attack. You have to reload unless you roll a 6. And reloading is an action that you grab a dagger, knock another arrow, set your crossbow, or snag a new potion. And the idea of this is that, like, you know, I just wrote loosely that weapons are ranged, right? Like a ranged d6. It doesn't matter to me what that is. You could flavor it as like, I have 20 knives I keep on a bandolier, and I just chuck one every time I have to reload. Pull out another one, chuck one, you know? That sort of thing. And, or, you know, it's the crossbow and I have to reset it, or bow and I'm grabbing more arrows. But basically, I wanted there to be, again, a reason you wouldn't just always use a ranged weapon, because I don't even have, like, that you're at disadvantage at close range or anything like that. I feel like that's almost too filly. Anyway. Mend armor, and I may have to, like, this just popped in my head an hour ago and I jotted it down. Spend a double action to reset your armor's uses and requires a tool. Snatch and dash is like move near and grab an item, swap weapons, open a door, quaff a potion, that sort of stuff. Sneak attacks, spell casting, we talked about. And unarmed, I'm not even sure of yet. I wrote no weapon, 1 damage on hit. You know, which, if you're potentially rolling a d3, still feels like you're doing something, but one damage is kind of painful. I guess if you're an orc, it's 2 damage, because they get a +1 to weapon damage and unarmed damage. And that's about as fiddly as it gets, number-wise. So, alright, I think this is going to be a shorter one today. I babbled a bit at the beginning and had some tech issues, but hopefully this excites you about what I'm working on. Obviously, this is as rough a rough draft as you're ever going to see, but I'm playtesting it as often as I can. In fact, I was doing daily playtests for like a week or week and a half, so something like that. But yeah, this is the game so far. There's some other stuff in here that's less fleshed out that, you know, I won't go through fully. Like, we have tags. There's stuff I just jotted down straight out of my brain onto the page. I don't even know if I like all of it. Like, confused 4 and 6 chance to hit a random target for D6 actions even feels crazy. You know, stuff like that. And, you know, obviously range bands is a familiar idea now. In initiative, I wrote side-based initiative just because every time we play tested it, I've barely used the concept of initiative. It's flowed so freeform in and out of combat that I almost don't want to distract the game by having a real initiative. It's kind of just like whoever initiates goes, and you swap sides after everyone's gone. And that's really it. It's been really cool because I think, like, not asking for initiative, not doing any sort of that rolling and that kind of stuff has kept people really in the narrative, which is cool to see. And so, like, as a result, instead of just attacking all the time, people have been like, I want to shove this guy. Like, I don't have a weapon right now, whatever, like, it got blinked away or something by a mage. And so I want to shove this dude with his own polearm, like, get up on him and try to, like, push him up against the wall. And it's just like, yeah, roll a 2d6, do it. There's nothing that says you can't. And that's kind of the game, like you guys should know every target number there is. You don't have to ask, did I hit? You don't have to ask, did I succeed in my intent? If you beat a 7, you get it, 7 or better, and you succeed. So that's pretty much it. I have some things about underclocks, which I already feel is too fiddly. And I may just delete. But anyways, okay, I think that's it for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm super stoked about this game. I've been having a ton of fun playtesting it, and it is, I genuinely, I think that it's gotten better with every playtest. Every time we shave off a bit of the rough edges, and it's starting to look like a ball now. And in fact, I played a game last night with Charles from What Is Tabletop and Ducky, who is writing Peasantry. If you haven't checked that game out, maybe I'll put a link after this, becomes a video. And I was just going to test one combat, but it kind of became a whole mini adventure, like a kind of 1 to 2 scene mini adventure. And we were just having a good time. There was a little bit of, this feels a little too loose, or this needs tightening. But I genuinely think it's shaping into a really cool game that, you could definitely run on the fly, because I did not prepare. They showed up, and I was like, oh crap, I don't even have, minis out yet. I just tossed out 2 kobolds and was like, okay, these are, angels or something. They're not kobolds. I rolled on the table and got angels. But here's what we have. Let's play. And we made a scene together. I kind of built it up for them and played off of some of the things I rolled really fast. And it worked. It was fun. It felt like D&D or, Shadow Dark or any of those games, except just really streamlined in that, sort of narrative flow way, which, it does take some creativity on the GM's behalf, because you are interpreting a lot of tables. But I don't think they really cared or noticed. I did it really fast. I crammed 2 words together. I was like, okay, they're chilling here. They're deep in their cups. They've been corrupted by something. I made this black glowing orb in the middle of the room, and they fought. They tried to do some other shenanigans, and it worked for a while, but then a few deadly sins were rolled, and it ended in a conflict. So, anyways, all that to say, I think it's shaping up really well fairly quickly. So I look forward to seeing what this is in the end, and it's already becoming something cool. So, all right, well, that's it for today. Like I said before, I'm gonna do full screen for this, but I'm gonna be giving this thing away. If we hit 5K by January, I'm gonna send this to somebody in one of these live streams. So stay tuned. Check out the mail list if you want to hear more about 7 Delving Sins as it gets more development. We already have a piece of art being worked on by Rob McNeil. I'm super stoked about it. It looks awesome already. If you haven't seen it, check out either my mail list through Substack or Patreon, either one. And you can kind of see what the cover is probably going to look like, at least kind of. But yeah, that's it. Thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for more. And, all the YouTube things. Appreciate you guys. See you next time.